Okay, everybody. Just a warm welcome along to today's tenancy webinar. Actually, part one of our tenancy webinar series through the Farm Advisory Service. I'm Robert Ramsey, so I work as an agricultural consultant in Auchengrove. I'm joined today by Kirsten Blackwood, who's assisting in the background, and also our keynote speaker is Andrew Marchant today. So we'll welcome Andrew just along in a minute. So obviously the tenancy sector, the tenancy is a vital part of what the makeup of Scottish agriculture. They've been here for a long time, and certainly be here for a long time to come as well. So um, good to have a decent turnout today, and also this will be recorded and go out later on. So if you want to take some notes or whatever, you'll be able to watch this later on. So perhaps you don't need to take notes. Um, the so really today is about the tenant's experience. So how do you get a tenancy? What's the process, and how do we how do you grow your business through tenancies? So Andrew's story is very interesting, and certainly will allow him to expand on that down the line. But certainly Andrew would be a new entrant 12 years ago, I think. Is that right, Andrew? So probably no longer a new entrant, one of those people who's at the kind of transition, or the hard to define what your position is now in the industry, Andrew, but certainly a mover and shaker and a lot happening in your business. So it's good to have you along today. The main thing is, though, it's not my webinar, it's not Andrew's webinar, it's your webinar. So if you've got any questions, my first question is, why aren't my slides clicking on? Please do ask questions through the chat function or the Q&A function as well. So the more questions you've got, any questions you've got, just ping them in there, and I'll see if we can get through them later on. So basically, without any further ado, Andrew, if I could just hand over to you to introduce yourself and make a wee start.
Right, thanks, Robert. Yeah, well, I'm Andrew Marchant. We farm an upland unit on Buccleuch Estates in Dumfriesshire. We started 2012, so just nearly exactly 12 years ago since we started. I didn't, it's kind of classic new entrant. Didn't come from a family farm. Neither did my wife. Got this sort of bug from farming that way, I suppose. So I'd always wanted to farm. Had been told by careers advisors and stuff at school that I was wasting my time because I didn't have a farm. So went away and did some engineering and other things for a few years, and quickly dropped out all that and ended up back in agriculture. So went on to do a degree in ag after that. Can you flick on another slide maybe, Robert?
Yes, of course, no problem.
So studied agriculture and then worked on various farms and various roles, beef and sheep to start with, and then went into the dairy sector. There was a few more opportunities in southwest Scotland dairy wise, so worked my way into a farm management role. And really that was, although I always was keen to start my own business, and the dream was always to farm in my own right, I felt that the closest thing I could get to that, was farm management, and thoroughly enjoyed that. It was tremendous, and although I was enjoying it, I still did have this hankering that I really wanted to try and get a unit of our own if possible. So we were starting to look at tenancies, but I suppose with the caveat that I really enjoyed the business I was managing. The job I had was great, working for good people. It was a big dairy business, so it was quite an exciting role. And although I wanted to farm, I wasn't going to do it at all costs. So, I needed a unit that I felt could offer me, enough scope to make it a sort of commercially viable unit. I didn't want to, I wasn't really in a position I could part-time farm a unit because I couldn't carry on doing my farm management job and doing that as well. So really, we were looking for a unit that would allow us the scope to build a sort of commercially viable unit that would employ me full time. If you flick on to the next one now, Robert.
Yep.
So yeah, spring of 2012, we took on Clonhie. It was advertised in the Scottish Farmer, must have been the back end of 2011. Prior to that, we'd been looking at tenancies. We were quite open-minded and flexible. You know, we would have travelled a fair bit to get one. I was based between Dumfries and Castle Douglas at the time, but we were quite willing to, you know, and quite aware that, you know, tenancy opportunities were that few and far between that we might have to, you know, there wasn't very unlikely the one popped up right on our doorstep. So we had been looking, we'd viewed a few farms over the country. Nothing had really been right for us. They'd either been bare blocks of land, you know, which didn't allow us to set up a base, or they'd been sort of not big enough with very little view to there being any chance to expand them. And as I said before, although we were desperate to start a business, so I wasn't going to do it at all costs. So we were lucky when Clonhie came up, it was advertised specifically that it might be suitable for a new entrant, which obviously sparked our interest. And we went and had a look and decided, yeah, it was ticking the boxes for what we were looking for. At the time, it was 230 acres, but there was a bit of room and a bit of scope to expand that as and when you felt you could take a bit more land on. So we put a heck of a lot of effort into the application process. At that point, we employed a consultant to do our tender bid for us, which is quite a commitment, and it's not something you maybe would always need to do, but we felt this was worth really going to town on and doing the best application we could. So we did that, and from then on, it was all about selling ourselves. The whole land and finance thing, it's a bit of a chicken and egg, I suppose, if that's what you would say, where, you know, you can't get the land if you've not got the money, but, you know, if you've got the money but there's no land there, it's difficult. So from then on, it was about selling ourselves to the estate to try and be successful in the tender, but also trying to find someone to back us financially. So I think what we put a lot of focus into that and a lot of time and effort, and we were quite lucky that we did manage to get, we were successful in getting Clonhie. There followed after that a very stressful time trying to get finance to back up what we wanted to do. In the end, quite a bit of savings we put in. We'd bought a wee house a few years before that, so we remortgaged that as much as we could, put all that in. Basically, every penny we had went in, and we managed eventually to get a bank to match fund us and get us going. We had a dozen ewes, but that was it. We had a few pedigree sheep that I'd built up over the sort of 4 or 5 years before that, but that was literally it. We turned up with 12 sheep, and yeah, it really was starting from scratch. So trying to think about how we would take that forward. Our attitude at the time was that we would, rather than sort of go and canny and taking a long time to build up the business slowly, I'm really impatient, and I was going to struggle with that. So we decided the plan was we would go hard at it for 5 years minimum. I would work away from home full time, reinvest everything we made from that into the farm, whilst fortunately my wife Aileen, she had a real job, so she was a teacher. She would carry on with that, and we would use her wage to live on. So that was the only way we managed it, because, you know, it was a team effort. It was fortunate we were both totally bought into what we were trying to achieve and committed to doing it. We were both willing to make the sacrifices we needed to make. And we basically set about 4 or 5 years of just, yeah, it was hard. There's no two ways about it, you know. Away from home all the time. I worked on local farms, feeding cattle, doing stock work. I was contract shearing sheep in summer, driving machines after that, crutching lambs in markets through the winter, just whatever we could to bring plenty of money in, which and that just all got invested into stock, and we just built a really lean business where we really low fixed costs and just focused on building the stock numbers as much as we could. Yeah, you can probably flick on to the next one now, Robert.
Yep.
So that's where we are now. We've managed to build up to about 850 acres. That's been a gradual process as land on the estate has come up round about us. We've managed to bolt that on to the original farm and steading that we had. We've still got the same steading. Nothing's really changed there, but we've just managed to bolt on extra land as we've went. It's every time there's been a chance to bolt on a bit of extra land, it's never been a good time, and we've never really had the money to do it. But nothing ever happens at the right time, is what we found. You know, every time you see an opportunity, you think, it's 2 or 3 years too soon for us. But you know, I've been a great believer in just pushing ourselves hard and finding a way to make it work. If we think it's going to stack up in the long term, you know, find a way to make it work short term. A lot of that's been around finding ways to improve cash flow. You know, we had quite a lot of sheds, so over the years we would bed and breakfast cattle in the winter, and we would graze or contract rear cattle in the summer as well, until we could afford to start buying our own cattle. So yeah, things like that, just to improve our cash flow and use the assets that we had, just allowed us to keep pushing on. So stock numbers, we've currently got about 800 breeding ewes. That was up to nearly 1,200 ewes at one stage. We had a bit of a change in tact at that stage. It just would probably just put a few too many on, and we were struggling getting the performance we were looking for. So at the same time, we were able to afford to increase our cattle numbers a bit, and we found it was working quite well. So we've cut sheep numbers back a bit. We've about 50 breeding suckler cows. These are the sheep and the cows are all outside the whole time. Nothing's housed. Cows are wintered on the fair grass on a hill, and a bit of crop or bale grazing to see them through the end if we run out of grass. Their calves are weaned and put in the sheds, and then the rest of the sheds are filled with Aberdeen Angus dairy beef calves that we buy in. So we buy in young calves and rear them on to bigger store cattle. We also have a small deer farm with about 350 red deer. And the last one there, we're currently contract farming a local on the estate where we run about 1,000 breeding ewes down there, plus some summer and winter cattle and stuff like that. We've had various joint ventures, contract farming type agreements over the years, and it's something we've been quite keen on, and it's something that's allowed us to grow the business as well, which has worked really well. I think there's a lot of scope for these sort of things going forward, so that's something that's worked quite well for us. It's working quite nicely at the moment, so it allows us to spread fixed costs, brings in a steady income as well, so it's working away quite nicely. Yeah, what's the next slide say? So this was really just a bit of some of the points I would say you really need to focus on if you are looking to, you know, whether it's applying for a tenancy. It's relative to anything really. Applying to a tenancy, you know, trying to get a bank to lend you some money, you know, looking to enter into some kind of joint venture. You know, there's lots of opportunities out there just now. CV was a big thing for us. It's something that a lot of people in farming you never think too much about, but the fact that you know, the fact that I'd got some qualifications and I'd built up experience in managing farms and working in different enterprises and showing that I could run a business had a big factor in us being accepted for our tenancy. Especially when you see tenancies that are advertised for new entrants, you know, when that's the case, it doesn't just come down to what you're offering per acre. Then that's when your chances there to try and sell yourself and prove, show that what you could be capable of. If there are farms advertised and they're looking for new entrants, that's a real opportunity there. And I feel, if you are looking to rent land off of someone and start a farm business, you really need to be able to prove that you've got relevant experience, you've held positions of responsibility, because people are, it's a leap of faith to rent a farm out to someone. You've got to prove that you're going to be capable of making a job of this. It's not just a case of, oh, I've always fancied farming, so can I rent your farm? It's not really going to cut it. You've got to be able to prove and demonstrate what experience you've got. So don't underestimate that. That's your chance to really sell yourself. And you need to go out there and build up that experience. There's a lot of people with maybe with a dream of being a farmer, but they're doing something else that's not even in the industry and don't have much experience. I mean, really, if you're serious about farming and being in agriculture, you need to be out there living it and doing it, really. Building up that experience, and that's what gives people faith in you. I would say it's also, I suppose, that's kind of in line with making a name for yourself. If you get out there, the agricultural community can be a great thing for spreading the word about how someone's a hard worker, how they're a great employee. They can leave them. They're very responsible. They work hard. They graft. Agriculture is a great industry for that. You can build up a name for yourself, but and that's something that you don't need anything behind you to do that. That's just hard work and the right attitude. Attitude's a lot to do with it. Nobody owes you anything. Go out there and you make your own luck. Get out there and prove to people what you're about, and it's amazing what opportunities might come your way. Also, I've got there build assets. It's a really difficult thing to do, especially in this day and age, because nobody's got much money anyway. But one thing we focused on, I suppose, was we didn't build up a lot of stock before we took the farm on, but we tried to build a bit of cash behind us so that we had something there to, any bank there's very few banks out there that'll just lend you a pile of cash without you putting your fair share in. So whether that's money tied up in livestock or whether that's just getting some cash behind you, it is really important and can make a big difference. I've said there, focus on key relationships. Whether that's a potential landlord, whether that's for us trying to get finance off of people, whether that's people you might think there's an opportunity to do some share farming or a joint venture with them. You've got to work hard at these things. It doesn't come, it doesn't just fall in your lap. For us, we put a lot of effort into. There's key people in our business. The estate, the landlord is one of them. The bank is another one. There's vets. There's people that we see as key to what we're trying to achieve, and we do put a lot of effort into getting on with these people and working with the right type of people, because it can make a heck of a difference. And if people are going to put a lot of faith in you and take a chance on you, they need to know they've got a good feeling about it. Open-minded and flexible. Really, there's so few opportunities out there that if you're going to pigeonhole yourself into a little box that, well, I want a farm, but only if it's within 5 miles of where I live, and only if it's a beef and sheep farm, and only if I can have this breed. Well, it's going to be pretty lucky if that happens for you. You've got to be if you're serious about it, you've got to be open-minded and flexible, as in, willing to move a bit geographically, but also willing to try different systems, different ways of farming, different breeds. I think that's what I was kind of getting at with the flexibility. If you're serious about it, don't narrow down your options. and know your figures. Really, for me, that's, if you've got an idea in your head, whatever that may be, 500 U's or whatever it is, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can make that profitable on paper. Because as soon as you go in to have serious conversations with landlords, with the bank, with any of these type of people, unless you know your figures and you know that it works on paper and it's got a chance to be profitable and sustainable, if you don't, you're going to get laughed out the door. It's just going to be a non-starter. Partly because they've a duty of care, I suppose, that, why would they put someone into an agreement or a farm that they don't think it's going to work? That's not going to happen. So you need to be sure that what you're proposing stacks up, and you need to know the numbers behind it as well. Yeah, so I suppose this was just, how do you grow a business, or how did we grow a business? How do you grow it, especially when capital's tight and you've maybe got various things you're battling against. I think for us, commitment's a given. If you're not 100% committed and willing to make some sacrifices and work hard, it's a non-starter. Farming's probably one of the few industries that you can still really build something for yourself through sheer hard graft. And although a lot of us are talking about work-life balance and how we need to get better at this as farmers, if you're starting a business from scratch, you can't worry about that for the first 5 years. You've got to be 100% committed, willing to be working, 7 days a week, because it's really, really difficult to make it work if you're not willing to make that sacrifice. Which is just reality of it, is the way it is, really. Cash flow is so important. Yeah, I mean, profit comes a wee bit further down the line, but really cash flow is what's gonna make or break you. Being able to turn over money, keep money coming in, keep bills paid, because you have to do what you say you're going to do. If you tell the bank and you set out what you're going to do and they give you an overdraft or whatever it is, in the first few years you can't be going back to them every 3 or 4 months looking to extend that overdraft all the time, because it just does nothing for your credit rating, does nothing for your reputation with them. So you've got to find ways of managing cash flow, managing your expectations as well, because everyone's desperate to grow a business really quick. I was the world's worst for just desperate to get my numbers up as quick as I could. But you've got to manage cash flow as well. And financial discipline's what will keep you moving forward. If you can be quite disciplined with it, you'll start off with a plan, and that plan's always going to change. But don't get carried away. Keep going back to the principles of what you set out to do with your business. It's a bit easy, I see some people get a wee bit distracted and head in a different direction, and it's difficult to make that work. Especially at the start, you need to keep it simple and really stick to the core principles of what you're trying to achieve. Because it is, it's hard and it's pretty relentless when you're first starting that business, but if you do stick to your guns, have faith and that financial discipline and put the graft in, it will bear fruition in the end. Output is quite important to me. You will hear a lot of people, saying, turnover's vanity and all this type of thing, but at the same time, it's really difficult to make a farm business. If you're, especially if you're tight for capital, you've a lot of borrowed money, you can't get away from the fact you need plenty of output. That doesn't mean you need a high input system, but it means you need to develop a system that's going to give you a good output in relation to what your inputs are. We've tried to develop low input systems, but still with a good output. And it's hard to get away from that at the start. Some businesses might be different if they're set up a bit differently, but That's one. It's always really important. Debt. Well, you might as well get used to it, I suppose. It's learn to live with it, but don't push it too far. I've been quite guilty of borrowing the absolute most I could possibly get for a long time, putting myself under massive pressure all the time. It was okay. The type of personality I had, I was able to deal with that, and I could see where I was going, and I felt it was the right thing to do at the time. But you've got to just watch you don't just overstep that mark a wee bit too far and then end up in a lot of bother. So yeah, debt's something you're going to need to have, and I think it focuses the mind. It's always been good, having a bit of debt certainly focuses you on what you're trying to achieve. But it's just about how you manage it, and I suppose scale and systems. For me, in our sort of beef and sheep enterprises, we're in a sort of lower input systems. We're working without winter stock, which are maternal hardy breeds. We need a bit of scale to make that work. We're not running an intensive system, so we're trying to minimise bought-in feed and fertiliser as much as we can. So for our system, scale's a big thing. Fixed costs are at the stage. It's so expensive to have tractors, machinery, these type of things. Not all systems need them, but as soon as you get into having a few fixed costs, you do need a bit of scale to be able to spread them. And systems, for us, it's about having simple systems that make the most of whatever your asset is, really. I suppose. I would say, especially if in the early years, if you're going to have to be away from home a lot of the time, you've not a lot of time to actually be working on your stock. You need these stock to be working for you, and real high input stock are difficult to manage if you're not there all the time. So it's probably something we've developed with an eye to that. When you are trying to build up your stock numbers, you can't afford to be that proud about it. You're at the market competing against people who are well-established farms, getting subsidy payment. First 5 or 6 years we didn't get any subsidy payments. We're trying to compete against people buying in stock that are getting a payment, that are well-established. It's really hard. You've got to do those tough yards if you want to get into it, but you can't be too proud about it. The time for that will come a wee bit further down the line when you can work on that type of thing. But it's really about getting that business up and started. But on a positive note, I would say there's a real lack of people in the industry with drive, determination, real hard-working people with commitment to take on loads of opportunities at the moment. So although there's not an abundance of tenancies coming on the market at the moment, it's been that way for the last 15 years. It's never really altered. But I do think there is a lot of opportunities in, various avenues to go down at the moment, whether that's tenancies, whether it's share farming, contract farming, joint ventures. There's loads of opportunities out there, and we've had a real positive experience of these things. They've really helped us grow our business. We've had a number of contract farming, joint ventures, and it's all about these things. The secret to success of all these things is about the relationships with people you're working with. You need to trust each other, but you also need to have a shared vision about what you're trying to achieve. And if you can find that, these sort of agreements and collaboration, cooperation is something we're not traditionally very good at it in farming, but I think there's loads of opportunities there. So I don't think it's as straightforward now as just I need to rent a farm. I think there's lots of other opportunities out there, and I suppose that comes back to being a bit open-minded and flexible about how you're looking to start a business.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew. There's a lot in that. That was a wee half-hour presentation, but there's an awful lot to take from that. We have some good questions and things kicking about. I suppose for me that there's a thing I was listening to an old Pasture Pod episode. I keep quoting the Pasture Pod, but it's really good. From Michael Blanche, exactly. There was a thing about basically how hard work now doesn't guarantee success. So I think from what you were saying about those first 5 years is you need to get your head down and work, which I totally agree with, but you need to get your head down but keep your eyes up and knowing your figures and knowing that where you're going, there's a lot of easy ways to lose money in farming. And if you take on a tenancy, borrow money, put your head down and work really, really hard and go down a rabbit hole, there's a real risk there. So I think that in the first few years, particularly knowing and monitoring your financial performance and knowing exactly where you're at
Yeah, 100%.
is
And that's what
yeah.
I was trying to touch on a wee bit with don't get sort of distracted and carried away. And, you see, it's easy to start off with great intentions and then you know, say that's, we're starting with sheep and we're going to have a low input system, we're going to cull hab and we're going to build this really robust yow. And then all of a sudden, but I've bought a few cows as well, and actually I might breed a few pedigree things and try and sell a few tups, and I might try and sell a bull, and it can quite quickly dilute whatever cash flow you've got can be out the window pretty quick. So you really do need to focus and yeah, hard work is key, but working smart as well. And there's
Mhm.
you can't just do what everyone else is doing. You've got to try, if you can try and find some kind of point of difference. For us, I suppose that was when it really kicked on, was when we got into paddock grazing and actually managing grass, and that transformed our business. Because all of a sudden, I suppose it did give us that bit of a point of difference. We weren't relying on so much feeding and fertilizer anymore. And, for us, especially for a new entrant, there's so much you can get out of grass for such a little capital investment that, that was probably a moment for us that really kicked us on and made a big difference. But I suppose it gives you that wee point of difference to what everyone else is doing round about you.
Yeah, and that grass story as well. You can take it to the nth degree, but even going into often you go into a tenanted farm and it's a wee bit down at heel. It's needing improved. There's nothing like grazing it properly to actually start that improvement process. It's a really good point in grass. I think on a livestock tenancy is obviously going to be managing grass will be, if we don't do that right, we're going to be in a difficult place. There's a question maybe about the kind of practical, what happened. So you obviously applied for your tenancy. What was the process from submitting your application? So we'll go in tomorrow's webinar. We'll go into a bit more detail in the actual what to include in that application. You also covered that today, Andrew. But from that point, was there a couple of interviews, or what followed on from the submitting the application to actually getting the keys for the farm?
Aye, so we would have went and viewed the farm a couple of times, then put our application together, and then we were shortlisted onto I think there'd be maybe 5 people on a shortlist, something along those lines, and then it would be an interview process after that. I think we found out we got the farm start of February and we were in start of March type of thing. So it was pretty quick. Yeah, interview process was quite. I suppose there'd be a lot of applications and they'd sorted out who sort of maybe fitted the criteria, and then it was into an interview after that. And I think it probably came down to the point of difference we had was we were looking to farm it full time and make it a commercially viable unit, and we were also managing quite a big farm business at the time. So I think that maybe that was maybe our sort of wee selling point that I don't really know.
I think there's an important point to make there is often these farms are let in the spring. It's quite common that and it doesn't suit us farming wise to be taking on a farm in March. If you're lambing ewes and things. But if you go into your interview and start moaning about when the entry date is, you're not going to get the farm. It's an annual. That year's the only year that's going to be an impact. So I
You've
think
got to
all
keep it
about
all
keeping it
positive.
positive.
It's
Yeah.
got to all be positive because the minute you start moaning and picking faults and things, it's a non-starter because it's so difficult to get the farm and to make that start that if you're not 100% positive and whatever it is, look at it as an opportunity rather than a problem, and it'll make a heck of a difference.
Mhm. Before we came on here, Andrew, we were talking about aging population of farmers, and probably a story we've been hearing for years is that there's going to be loads of farms coming forward because everyone's getting older. And actually, that's not entirely what's happening on the ground. Obviously, people are getting older, but the raft of tenancies aren't quite coming forward the way we thought they would. However, with that, there is a change. There's a lot more contract farming and different options out there. Could you briefly run through, not the big figures or anything, but how does your contract farming agreement work, and is it probably the way to expand the business?
Yeah, so the contract farming agreement we've got at the moment is on a neighbouring estate, and they were sort of ceasing in hand farming and still wanted to be seen as a farmer, but didn't want to farm it themselves, so approached us to farm it, provide the contract services to farm it. So we supply labour, machinery, fuel management, basically just run it as we do our home farm. However, they still maintain ownership of the stock, and we have regular sort of meetings with them and agree budgets and such like. So what it means for our business is we get a monthly contracting fee, which is good for cash flow. I didn't need any capital to grow my business because I wasn't buying any stock. We had the machinery already that we could use on that. So it allowed me to expand my business without any capital and spread my fixed costs. We get a contract fee, plus we're on a profit share if there's any profit left at the end of it, and it works fairly well. It's allowed us to employ a full-time member of staff, which brings other benefits to our own business as well. And yeah, I think it's a great way of expanding a business. It would also, I mean, it's the type of business you don't need a lot of machinery, so you wouldn't necessarily need to be farming already to take on some of these contract farming agreements. But certainly for us to expand, it's been a great way of doing it without borrowing any more capital, because that's always the killer. I have heard of some other contract farming agreements where you maybe get a chance to buy into the stock, or own a percentage of the stock. I've always thought, if I was starting again, that would be a really attractive option for me. If I'd have been able to do that sort of agreement and buy myself into some of the stock, then hopefully without borrowing too much money, that would have been a nice way of doing it. It's probably more common in the dairy sector. Down in this area, there's a lot of that share milking and that type of things happening. So to get an opportunity to sort of build up some assets without any debt would be really attractive.
Yeah,
but
so
again, it's all about relationships. If you can find people that you can work with, that you trust and have got a bit of respect for each other, and got a common view on where you're trying to take it, you're onto a winner, really.
Yeah. We quite often get asked, and I happily always really pleased to get asked about contract farming, but quite often the question we get is, can you send us a contract farming agreement? Well, it doesn't work like that. Contract farming is a great way of both parties getting, it's a sit round the table, work out what everybody wants, and then formalise it through one of the various contract arrangements that we can have. Because as you say, Andrew, some of them, it's about the young person or the contractor building their stock, so they would be paid or rewarded in a share of the stock. Sometimes it's about keeping a business going on. We've seen it where it's a sad story. Maybe a farmer has died and there's young kids coming on, and there's somebody fills that gap for a few years to keep the stock there. There's also the most common one probably is the person who's at the stage they want to retire but don't want to leave the farm, and they want to do a bit less. In that case, it can be tricky when it comes to profit shares and things. It can be tricky if the business isn't profitable to start with. It's hard to find it's hard to get to the both parties being better off.
You need a
But
wee bit of
it's
flexibility in it as well, because if you set out with you set out with an agreement in year one that you think is going to work, but it quite often takes a wee bit of time to bed in, and you need both sides need to be willing to yield a wee bit and work out what is actually going to be sustainable going forward. Because if it's too heavily weighted in either side, it's not going to work long term. So you
Aye.
need that understanding for both sides, I would say.
I heard a spring calving dairy farmer who they're big into this in terms of shear milking and things. And their attitude was that they would rather work with the worst farm possible but the best person. And if the best farm came up with the wrong person, don't do it. So it's all about relations. And that comes to, I mean, that goes right back to full tenancies as well. Those estates or people who might be looking for a tenant, sometimes you might not want to work for that or work alongside that.
100%, and I would
That
say
tenant.
that the way we've developed is testament to that. We've had a great relationship with Buccleuch, and we've I would like to think we've done what we said we were going to do. We've delivered on what we set out to do. We've had it, and they've given us time to prove ourselves, and that's resulted in us being able to expand the amount of acres we're farming. So it works both ways, and if you can find someone to work with like that, it makes life so much more enjoyable. But it needs to work for both. It needs to be mutual. There's a lot of people with views of how things should work, but really you've both got to be getting something out of it, and you need to keep that in your mind all the time. A landlord has to be getting something out of it. Now, whether that's obviously they're going to get a rent, but they want to see their land well farmed. They want to see their assets maintained and hopefully improved. And really, they want to see people taking a bit of pride in what they're doing, a bit of drive, and a bit of go forward. So yeah, we've been fortunate, and hopefully, it's both parties have come to the table, and it's worked well.
Yeah. And I suppose, beginning to sum up, I'm going to call you old Andrew. What would old Andrew say to young Andrew? So 12 years ago, you were coming into that farm. What advice would you give to yourself looking back? And in addition to that, what does the next 12 years look like?
I think I would tell myself to take a wee bit of time to try and enjoy it when you can. When we got the farm, it was just, it was like, oh, Christmas is coming once. It was such an achievement that we'd actually got a tenancy on a farm. And then from then on, it was real, it was head down, arse up for 5 years, and it was relentless, and it was really difficult and so strong. But it was a means to an end, and we got through it, and we've built a business that we're really happy with and really proud of now. But I probably was so knackered and stressed out the whole time that I wasn't taking time to enjoy it, and really never once did I say, oh, I'm really pleased with what we've done. I was always just really hard on myself. Right, we need to push on. We need more yows, we need this, we need that. I never sort of took a minute to say, oh, we're actually doing all right here. Just that didn't come into it. It was just, we need to keep pushing all the time. And so probably it was a bit, and it was hard, and it's hard on family life. It's hard on everyone. So yeah, I probably could have done to have been a wee bit more sensible about it. But I wouldn't change it. It's got us to where we wanted to be. Going forward, I think priorities have changed. The way we look at the business has changed. We're still, our original sort of plan to develop sort of low cost, lower input systems. We're still, steadfast in what we do with that. But I think I think we went a bit too intensive with sheep, and we tried to push a few things a bit too hard. And I think we've maybe realigned it a wee bit now. We're more interested in trying to get the balance of the business right. A blend of sheep and cattle, trying to make a business that's going to be sustainable going forward, but still driven by producing an output. And I think we're always going to need to be. But yeah, I think we've never, the way we focus on financials, we look at figures a lot, whether that's budgets, whether that's slamming percentages, calving percentages, growth rates. I've always been dead keen on these, and that focus will not change. You know, that's what drives our business and what we try and do going forward. So I don't think there's any major changes. I think we can tweak the systems that we have to make them better, and hopefully we'll be able to keep growing and keep upscaling them. You know, the way our sheep and cart systems work, they're all fairly easy to scale up. So really, it's just trying to get a bit better at everything. You know, we spent a lot of years just trying to get bigger, so now it's trying to get better, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose a shout out to the monitor farm program as well. So obviously you were a monitor farmer and still very involved in that, and obviously sharing information like you're doing today, learning from your own mistakes and learning from other people's mistakes is where we're at as an industry, and I hope going forward we can continue to share as much as we have been and grow together, because it's tough out there. And
It's made a hell of a difference for us. I mean, the monitor farm was fantastic. It came at a good time for us. Made a big difference to our business. We're in a couple of discussion groups now, and they make a big difference to me personally. You know, having groups of like-minded people you can speak to. You know, I've had so many people have helped me out over the years. You know, friends and neighbours that have, you know, really went out their way to help us get established. Um, you know, it's just we've been really lucky, and I've made so many mistakes, and uh, you know, I still do now. But when you get the important thing is getting a group of people around about you that the WhatsApp group is it's all about pictures of the mistakes you've made. It's not about all the great things. You know, you're just that's what makes a big difference when you know everyone else is in the same boat. But no, having that makes a big difference for us.
it's funny how you put Facebook and Twitter is where you put the good stuff, but the trusted WhatsApp groups is where you put all the problems. So, and
Definitely.
somewhere in the middle is the truth. Um, lots to go at, Andrew. That's been brilliant, really, really good. Hopefully a good insight for everybody as to what it's been like, and the opportunities that are presented or have been presented by tenancies. I think we rightly touched on the way that the game has changed, and perhaps the solely chasing for a 20-year tenancy is maybe not the right thing to do. There's contract farming, share farming, shorter term tenancies. There are options out there, and it's just about being flexible enough to take those opportunities. There was one question which I'll deal with, is actually the one about the lack of subsidy. So when you started, you were in the previous subsidy system that didn't have a national reserve. So that was a real difficult time in the kind of in around 2010 in the old system, where you were shut out from the old subsidy system, and the only option you had was to actually go and buy entitlement. And as Andrew rightly points out, there's only so many times you can only spend £1 once, and when you're trying to build stock, trying to build assets, entitlements were a hard thing to deal with as well. Happily now it's not a perfect system, but the current system we're in does have a national reserve, which would be, you can only have one crack at it, but there are now options to get into that system. So you would hope that if you started a tenancy today, you'd be less shut out than you were in the past, but certainly not. It's not no subsidy system's ever ideal, but it's certainly better for a new entrant at the moment. And we'll look forward to seeing what the future future support scheme brings in terms of new entrant support as well, because it's a very much needed sector that we deal with as well. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Really, on the Farm Advisory Service website, it's worth shouting out there's a new toolkit for tenancies. So there's a lot of materials there to help you submit your own tenancy application. Obviously, as Andrew said, there are consultants available who can assist you with that. However, obviously that comes with a cost as well. So even if it allows you to do the legwork and have a look at what might be needed, start to formalise an application, or whether you go through and do the full application, it's the resources are there to be used, and hopefully this also is useful. And I'm pretty sure, Andrew, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. I'm sure people will be able to contact you as well, just to have a wee chat if you had a specific query. I'm sure Andrew will be.
Yeah, no, 100%. If anyone's ever got any questions, just it's no problem. We've had a lot of people have helped us out over the years, so I'm more than happy to speak with anyone that just want to chat about anything.
Yeah. Brilliant. But the same as the tenancy application goes, keep it positive. So yes, no, Andrew, thank you very much. That was a one-man show. Brilliant. Thank you very much. As I say, hopefully that's been useful for everybody who's on. Tomorrow, same time tomorrow, we've got a more maybe a more formal presentation from Jennifer Galloway in Stranraer and me. So Jennifer's our tenancy specialist in the Southwest, and is going to take a deeper dive into the actual kind of legalities and things of tenancy, and I'll do a bit on the process of applying, which Andrew's touched on really well today. But hopefully these two will go together pretty well as a nice wee series. So if it's of interest tomorrow, we'll see you again tomorrow, and certainly this will be recorded and going on the FAS website down the line as well. So yes, big thank you to everyone who's attended, and yeah, big thanks to Andrew.
No worries.
All the best.